welcome. My name is Rachel Crooks. I am the Nature Recovery Lead at Wild Oxfordshire. I'm here with my colleague Imogen Parker, who is our community ecologist. And yes, we are here this webinar this evening on how to create an effective habitat management plan. We're asked this question quite a lot. We give advice to lots of community groups. And yes, recognise that there is a bit of a need for this, which is reflected by yourselves turning up. So thank you. Yes, everyone's muted and shouldn't have a video kind of on. But yes, the chat function is available. So if you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat. Okay, hopefully this is going to work. Okay. So a brief introduction to Wild Oxfordshire for those who might not know us. We're a small conservation charity, nature recovery charity based in the south of Oxfordshire in Little Whittenham. We're a team of about 12 people, and our two kind of main aims are to, one, have more people positively engaged in conserving and nature, enhancing nature across the county and beyond. And secondly, it's bringing together Oxfordshire's environmental change makers together, enabling them to work collaboratively to achieve nature's recovery. And by change makers, we mean, local authorities, landowners, community groups, and people like you who obviously have an interest in managing land. So I'm just checking the waiting room. Brilliant. So yeah, what we do, we have all sorts of different projects going on across Oxfordshire. One of the things we do is collaborate with lots of groups. So we kind of get together lots of partnership meetings from people from environmental NGOs, local authorities, all those people kind of across the conservation sector, bringing them together and finding out what they're up to, seeing if there are any opportunities for partnership working, which we do lots of. We also do a lot of providing bespoke advice to people through our community ecology service, which me and Imogen provide. So that's providing advice to local groups, town and parish councils, landowners, schools, businesses, anyone who wants to kind of make a change in their local area for nature. We also have various different inspiring projects. So we have two projects focused around, we've got one around curlew and one around yellow wagtails that we run kind of across the county and beyond. And we also have our Even Load Catchment Partnership, which does really great work in that area of kind of West Oxfordshire District Council. And informing, we do lots of looking ahead and kind of sharing advice to people like yourselves, and kind of feeding into policies as well, whether that be at the local scale or sometimes even at the national scale for important things. I'd encourage everyone to have a look at our website if you haven't been there already. I'll send this around with all the kind of links and resources that we'll be collating throughout the talk. But yeah, we've got a great map of all the different community groups that are operating across Oxfordshire there, who are taking action for nature's recovery. So yeah, do check that map out. And we have all sorts of different resources for community groups on different habitats. How best to manage grasslands, how to plant hedgerows, species-specific advice. So yeah, do check that out. We'll be sending that link around after the talk. So just a very brief rundown of what we're going to be covering, or a few things we'll be covering. So when is a management plan appropriate? How long should it be? What are the key parts to a plan? What kind of sections should you kind of ideally be having in there? And then how to ensure its long-term success kind of going into the future. So if you have access to the chat, which hopefully you all do put in this chat what sort of site you might be thinking about managing. You come here today, you might have a site in mind, you might already be managing a site and want to kind of reinvigorate the management plan. So yeah, it'd be great to share kind of what sort of sites you're thinking about learning. Is it a road, a road verge? Is it a community green space? Let's see what people are managing. If we are having issues with the chat, here we go. No, here we go. Small woodland and small meadow. Great. One that's very overgrown and want to be re-established. A water meadow, urban green space. Green spaces, that's part of a local development. a meadow, community orchard, and a cemetery, community vegetable garden, road verges, grass verges. These are all exactly the sorts of sites that we would expect management plans to be associated with. So you've come to the right place. So yes, what is a management plan? So it is basically a document that outlines kind of practical actions to be taken at a site by a responsible body or group of bodies with the intention of improving or maintaining it in the long term. So these sorts of plans can be focused around wildlife specifically. Some plans are just focused on getting certain species to a site, or it can be focused around people. So it might be a more recreational sort of site, or a site where people are maybe coming to sit and enjoy nature. Yeah, nice combination of the two. One of our kind of key messages through this talk is going to be very much there is no kind of one size fits all when it comes to writing a management plan. It's going to very much depend on things like the size and the complexity of the site. So if you've got quite a small site or it's got relatively simple habitats, that is generally going to need a less kind of complex plan there. We got to think about the users of the plan. The users, a management plan that's going to be used by a community group or by kind of lay people, it's going to be very different to one that's going to be, managed by kind of a big forestry management company or even contractors if you're associated with a parish council or similar. So yeah, always going to depend on the users of the plan and its overall aims as well. So again, is it going to be for nature? Is it going to be people? It's going to be very, very different depending on those. No matter what the size of the plan or what it contains, it's got to be useful for the end users. I've seen quite a few management plans in my time where they are just, not particularly fit for purpose because they're too detailed or just too long. So people get really, really lost in all the bump that can come with these sorts of plans. The risk is that you create a massive plan. It's beautiful and lovely, I'm sure, in your eyes, but if no one else can use it, it's not going to be helpful. Yeah, definitely my advice would be don't create one and leave it on a shelf as well. Quite often, you'll put effort into it, creating this lovely plan, and then 1 year down the line, you might have just forgotten about it entirely, or just started deviating from the kind of pre-planned actions. So, yeah, those are some general kind of bits of advice we would give to yourselves. So when is a management plan appropriate? I think the first step is very much you need to have management influence of the site. So you either need to kind of own it or have some sort of agreement with the owner of the site that you can manage it. I'd say you don't need to know everything about the site at the start. Quite a lot of the time, if you're a community group or parish council, you're going to be handed, some plans of an area, perhaps, or be shown a site, and yeah, very much, you're not going to know everything about it at the start. So you might have to do a little bit of information gathering, which we'll be coming on to. And yeah, a requirement for a plan is not directly related to its size. So we've got kind of two sites here. One is very much a plain patch of grass. And this patch of grass, the management might just be mow it, once every few months, or once every couple of weeks. And that is, maybe one of those things where you maybe don't necessarily need a whole management plan for this bit of grass. Although if you are doing things like creating wildflower meadows or planting hedgerows here, then that's when you might well need a plan in place to make sure you're getting those habitats the best start, establishing them well. But this is a little community orchard on the right. It's quite a small orchard, but because you have got fruit trees in there, looks like you have got some grassland down here and kind of grasslands of differing lengths. Bit of scrub at the back. It's a small site, but because you have got quite a nice mix of habitats there, you might want a plan there just in place to know what you're doing with all those different habitats. So yeah, it's very much a document to know who is doing what. So you might not have one person, involved with it. It might be a mix of volunteers, contractors, tree specialists. So it's setting out who's doing what within the plan and your overall management objectives. We've outlined a few sites that might benefit from management plans here. So kind of key green spaces, kind of big public areas, such as community nature reserves. Those who have regular work parties, so if you have volunteers going there, it's really good to have a plan in place that they can follow and kind of create, work party actions against. That's, yeah, particularly helpful. When a site has a particular vision or kind of overall objectives, these will very much be fed into a plan. And yeah, we recommend that these aren't just aspirational. So, in 5 years, we want to create the most beautiful biodiverse meadow that anyone's ever seen with all these lovely orchids in it. Sometimes you do have to be a bit pragmatic and focus on what is going to be achievable in that timescale that you've set out. Um, Definitely for any kind of larger, complex, or more sensitive sites. So those that might have had protected species identified on them, or have those rarer habitats like maybe woodland, lovely floodplain meadows, those sorts of things. Water courses important as well. So yeah, any habitats that are a little bit kind of out of the ordinary, definitely get a management plan in place to make sure that you're managing them sensitively. Basically, anywhere that there's going to be kind of long-term and kind of sustained resource management, it is good to have a plan in place. So I'm just going to have a quick support here. So who should be the main audience for the plan? So in the first instance, it's going to be very much those involved in the management of the site. So again, think about your end users of the plan. Is it going to be useful for them? It might well be, the local community that you're sharing the plan with. So if you're a community group or parish council, you might want to put that on your website somewhere. So might want it to be a little bit more kind of simple in terms of its language if you are going to be communicating that. Any funders. So you might have a management plan drawn up to then take to a funding body. We've got the Trust for Oxfordshire Environment here. So, they quite often like to see a management plan to make sure that you've got that kind of long-term thought into any projects that you might be undertaking. And indeed, just anyone you want to communicate, what you're doing at the site with. So our tips generally is to try and keep the language simple. You never know who's going to pick it up. They might not know their, you know, MG4 grasslands from their MG3s, I don't know. So yeah, keep it simple for most people to understand. We generally use the kind of future tense in our reports, so it's going to be the grass will be cut every X number of times. And yeah, definitely add relevant images because that can really let people know what sort of habitats are there, the kind of size of the different areas, and maps. We'll go on to this a little bit later. How long should a plan last? So what time period should this be covering? Generally, management plans are put in place for 5 years at a time. So you can do shorter, maybe if we're making some very drastic changes in management to a site, but longer than this is not really recommended. 5 years kind of gives enough time to see the effects of the management. So, if you were establishing a meadow, you can then start to see some of the plants maybe establishing there, or a hedgerow starting to develop, woodland starting to develop. But it also gives you a good point to stop and review with what's going well at the site and maybe not going so well. And yeah, as I say, it might be a point at which new habitats, might start to emerge after this time period that you might not be expecting to emerge just as a result of your management. So 5 years is a good point to kind of, stop and review. So what sort of information do I need to start getting a plan together? So you acquire a piece of land, step out onto it for the first time, and it looks something like this. Are you ready to write a management plan? Me personally, I don't think I would be. I don't really know what species are maybe at the site. There's some nice kind of flora going on here with kind of these different scrubby species that are appearing. I don't know what kind of grassland it might be, therefore, and I don't know how people are using it. Is it a public access site? Is it cut off from everyone? Is it maybe, I don't know, farmed in some way? So yeah, definitely I want to get some information together. So yeah, just to start off, I would start getting some information about the habitats and species present. We'll come on to this in just a minute. History of how it was previously managed. If you're kind of inheriting it from someone, this can be really useful just to hear about how the land has changed and any habitats it might have previously been that you might want to restore. How it's currently being managed, if that's relevant. So you can kind of continue that management or indeed stop that management if you want to, and know how much resourcing that did involve as well. And you've got to think about the overall aims of the site. Do you want to improve for pollinators? Do you want to make it a nice, peaceful place for people to sit? Make it a productive site. Growing food there, diversify the number of species there, or do you want to focus more on the access of the site? Do you want to kind of bring people in there? So, whenever you start making a management plan, always start thinking about what you want the site to look like in that kind of 5-year period. I'm now going to pass on to my colleague Imogen.
Hi, so as Rachel said, I'm Imogen Parker. I'm a community ecologist at Wild Oxfordshire, and I'm just going to follow on from what Rachel was saying about the key sections of the management plan. Here we are. This slide refers to the site context. And this is information that you can include in an introduction. So this is the key information that allows people to understand the site. Obviously, it's listed here where the site is, how big it is, who owns it, current access, how it's used, is it, how does it fit into the community if it's a green space? And just to summarize some of the key habitats. And I would also include in here if there's anything else that's key, such as if it's a designated site, even if it's a bit of repetition into following sections, you can just summarize some of that in here if you think that is key information in an introduction. Next slide, please, Rachel. So this is how do I know that my habitats are valuable? And this also feeds into the information that you can find out to actually include in your management plan. And a lot of this is going to be compiling the information that you already have and the desktop study, the desktop review. I won't read everything out, but this is some examples of how you can approach this. Now, if it's a site that you know quite well and there's already some key volunteers and management that's already been carried out, then you probably already have quite a bit of information. If it's a fairly new site, then obviously you're going to need to do that investigation into the site and pull that information together. As Rachel has already said, you don't need to know everything about the site. I have come across that recently where someone felt that they couldn't have a management plan because they didn't know everything about the site. But you're always going to find out more about the site. And as Rachel's already said, things are going to change anyway over time. There's going to be changes in vegetation dependent on the management and also dependent on environmental conditions. So you can't possibly know everything. But this just gives you some examples of how you can approach that. Next slide, please, Rachel. This is a guide that we updated in partnership with West Oxfordshire District Council last year. And this is a good overall guide, and we'll send this out in an email with some other useful documents that we refer to and that we think will help. So you can find this on our website, but we will send the link. This is the community, town and parish guide to nature recovery. And it just gives a really good overview of whether you're creating a management plan, thinking about management, how you can improve the site. If you're creating an action plan for several different sites, it's a helpful document to refer to, and it also has some good website links in the back, which should help get you started in terms of that investigation that I referred to earlier. And this particular slide shows you some habitats, some landscape features and some habitats that are valuable for wildlife. It's not an exhaustive list, but it just gives you some examples. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the habitats and species information. It's obviously one of the key parts of the management plan. Now for this, you may have quite a lot of information, but it really wants to be a summary, because if you've got a lot of information, as Rachel alluded to earlier, you don't want reams of information. You want someone to be able to pick the management plan up and just have a good summary of the information that they need to understand the site. And any supporting information can be put in an appendix or an annex, so they could be previous surveys that have been done on long species lists. Yeah, it's just some examples of what you might want to include, and also photos are really good, and I will allude to that a bit more later on. Next slide, please, Rachel. This is just an example of how you might want to approach it. Think about how you want to separate out the habitats, or the way that areas are managed, or geographical areas. Just think about what would be useful, because there isn't a right or a wrong. It just needs to be pragmatic, and it's also useful to think about a map. It's always good to have a map which will illustrate your different habitats and features, and I will talk about that in a bit. So that if I'm doing a management plan, I think about that. I think, how am I going to approach it? How am I going to, separate out the habitats or the areas, and how am I going to illustrate that on a map? So yeah, next slide. This is just a photo which really is useful to illustrate the different areas. You can see the short, the mown grass here, the longer meadow areas, and obviously you can use that to illustrate those different areas, as well as a map. Yeah, next slide. So this is just talking about the maps, as I referred to earlier. There's no sort of right or wrong way, but you could base it on the phase 1 habitat survey, the broad habitat types, and you can also use UK habitat assessment classification, which is often used, I would say probably more regularly now than phase 1 habitat. It's really, I find it very useful, because you have more detailed, you can really sort of, you can use a more detailed description, or you can use broad habitat types, and you can get that document to refer to online. But it's really what works for you. I don't always use those descriptions. I might slightly vary them, because ultimately it needs to be useful, as long as people understand what is being referred to. You don't have to be too technical about it. As it says here, be pragmatic. You don't need to go into lots of detail, and you don't need to spend too much time worrying about, well, is it this habitat or that habitat? I mean, maybe you do for some sites, especially if they're sensitive, if they're, say, triplocytes, if you need to have that detail. But for your green spaces, you probably don't need to worry too much about exactly what habitat you've got. And it says here, use target notes if useful, and you'll see an example of that on a map. So if we can go on to the next slide. So just got a few example maps here, which I'll go through. This one's been created on PowerPoint. It's a fairly simple map, and you could also draw it by hand. You don't have to do it electronically. It just obviously looks quite professional, but some people you know, could draw a map by hand, and it looks perfectly fine. The key thing though is to have a legend or a key, so that you can actually refer to those areas. You can use a letter or a number, and then obviously mark that on the map, and also mark other features that, you know, non-habitat features such as pathways, buildings. You may even, you know, other types of infrastructure such as gates and fences, if that's useful to your plan. We can go on to the next slide. This is another example of a map. This was created using QGIS, which is free GIS software. It's open source, meaning you can download it for free. I haven't personally used it, but I have colleagues who use that. So if you're quite a whiz, maybe you don't need to be a whiz on using GIS software, then you might want to take a look at that. And this has just got some target notes on there, which is why we've included this map, just to show how that might be used. And it's also got some general habitat descriptions. As I mentioned earlier, they don't necessarily fit exactly with phase 1 or UK HABS classification, but you can see here that they are marked clearly, and they're also, you know, it's zoned, so it's clearly illustrated. We can go on to the next map. This is another example of a map. Again, you've got the different areas that have been zoned. Some people use the term compartments, and some people might not like to use that term. I've come across someone recently who didn't like the term compartments because it sounded a bit too technical. So you may actually want to give them familiar names if that's going to be useful. You don't have to refer to sort of compartment A or B if as I say, it sounds a bit too formal. And you can see the key here that shows the different habitat and features, and you know, other areas of interest here shown on a map. And it also have arrows with boxes rather than target notes, because with this particular map that just seemed to fit well. And these are useful bits of information that you know, are included in the management plan as well. So this map was created using the Land app, which is also free GIS software. I believe we've actually got Marcus on this webinar. So Marcus may want to put something in the chat about that. So Marcus is a core member of the Middle Windrush Land and Nature Group, and his presentation showing some key elements, the mapping tools for the Land app, is actually on the TVET website, so we can send that around. But Marcus, do put some information in the chat if yeah, if you would like to do that. So we can go on to the next slide. And here we've come on to other key sections of the management plan. We have the management objectives and proposals. So you can have a separate objective section, which links to the vision and the aims, and a separate management proposals, or you can include it in one. As we've said previously, there's no sort of hard and fast rules. Whatever works. It depends how detailed and how long your management plan you feel it needs to be, and separate out those those different habitat areas, however you see fit, whatever is the most pragmatic. It needs to set out a summary of what will be done each year, how and why. The reasons for management, and be useful for people who are going to pick up the plan. I mean, in some cases, it might be that new people come on board to manage the site, or new volunteers. And it really needs to be a useful summary so they understand and they can pick that up. We can go on to the next slide. This is just a more detailed example. Obviously, you're not going to be able to read that all now on the screen. There's a reference to a map with different compartments, different zones. And this is for a more sensitive site where they're, more notable sort of rare species, sensitive chalk grassland. So for that, there was just a bit more detail that needed to be included in the management proposal section. We can go on to the next slide. So it's really useful to have a work programme table. This is just an example of a simple one that you could easily put out, and this really should be this should be viewed in conjunction with the management proposals. It needs to be reviewed every year. Because obviously it's a summary, and some things you can't foresee. Then there may be additional management tasks that will be adopted within the lifetime of the plan. There may need to be some tweaks. So you can always say in your management plan that this work programme is going to be reviewed every year. We can go on to the next slide. This one is slightly more detailed. It actually gives you the month. Well, the other one gave you the month, but this is this allows you to tick which month. So some people might prefer that, and it refers to the different compartmental zones as well, which you could add into the previous table. So it really is about preference, whatever is the most useful. And I would say in terms of management, yeah, as long as you've got the location and you've got the detail there, you've got the reasons, the summary of the reason why, and the time of year that it's going to be carried out, and the location, you've got what you need there. We can go on to the next slide. These are example maps to link with the management proposals. Now, it might be that you don't need an additional map. It might be that your habitat and species map suffices because you've already zoned it, and in the key you've got letters or numbers that you can refer to, especially if it's quite a small site, and you may not need another map. This is an example from one of South Oxfordshire District Council's sites for the management plan for that site, and it just shows how they've illustrated different management compartments. We can go on to the next slide. Now, this is a different type of map. This was actually done it wasn't for a management plan, it was for an ecological report, but it just gives an example of a map where you can show management opportunities and constraints. You might decide to do a different style map, which supports your management proposals and your objectives. And this is just a simple map with color coding and stars. So yeah, sometimes simple is better. We can go on to the next slide. So here we have we're talking about the survey and monitoring section of the plan. You don't always have to have another table, another program, but that might be useful to illustrate that. You may want a written section as well. In fact, I would recommend that there is a written section, even if it's just brief, to support a table if you put that in. And here it says as much or as little detail as required. And in this section, you're obviously going to detail the surveys that you're planning to carry out the lifetime of the management plan. It might be for some surveys you don't need to carry them out annually. You may only do one year, depending on what it is. If it's a more complex, time-consuming survey, so for example, like a BioBlitz, you can also include ad hoc surveying. You may not want to, you may not be able to program that in. So that's the case of people recording what they find on site as and when using recording apps. And you may also want to include monitoring that's not actually monitoring wildlife. It might be monitoring impacts, whether they're positive or negative, such as the impact of recreational pressure. And then we come on to what should you survey? Well, that really does depend on obviously what habitats you have. And who's available to carry out those surveys, and what the local knowledge is. So that needs to be a discussion when you're actually creating the management plan. But it would be good to have some surveys that will show over the lifetime of the management plan, the impact of the management and the improvements to the site, and ones that you can compare year in, year out. So have some consistent surveys that every year that allow you at the end of those 5 years to look back and try and work out, have there been improvements, which, you're not going to be able to do 100%, because it might be 1 year there was loads of rain. In fact, that might be quite likely, or a drought, for example, but it just gives you that additional information. We can go on to the next slide, Rachel. So this is supporting information. I've already mentioned about photos. So you may want to include some photos in the main part of the management plan, especially if it's supporting the habitats and species, or showing particular access elements for the site. And you may also want to include some photos in the management proposal section, if that's useful. But if you have lots of photos, then it may make sense to include that into an appendix, or some people call that an annex, especially if it's a fairly new site that's been taken on. It's really useful as baseline information. And other supporting information you may want to include in an annex could include detailed species lists and surveys. And you also can think about additional sections of the management plan. So we've got here potential issues and threats. That could just be a simple summary, or even a table that you include. And we have the environmental policy context. So what I probably should have referred to earlier when I was talking about the species and habitat section is actually that can form the whole environmental information section of a plan, where you also summarize soil, geology, landscape, other aspects that are important, such as, some sites it might be hydrology. So that can be included in that section, or that can even be a separate section in itself, as it says here, upcoming slide. So yeah, we can go on to the next slide.
Great. I think we're passing over back to me now. So yeah, kind of taking all of that into account, how long does a plan take to put together, and how complicated should it be? I'm hoping that you've kind of gleaned from our talk so far that it doesn't have to be complicated necessarily, especially if you've got a simple site. And it's really going to depend on how much information you've kind of got to hand. You can put as much detail in there as you'd like. But yeah, again, remember your audience. Don't make it too, onerous for them to trawl through. As you're going through, always when you're putting things in, say, is this useful? Is it informative? And indeed, are people going to be able to interpret what you're saying kind of going forward? Yeah, definitely, we would not recommend using a really big kind of time-consuming system. We've had people come to us saying, "Oh, we try to use there's this big conservation management system where you kind of put together all things like this." And yeah, we reckon keep it simple. We've had plans that are just a few pages long before, just kind of outline management plans, and but also for those more complicated sites, we you know have written plans that have been upwards of 50 pages before. So yeah, gives you a bit of an idea. I saw a question in the chat if we've got templates available. Yes, we will be sending templates around, both of an outline management plan, so a more simple site could be used for this, and a more detailed one. So yeah, we'll be sharing that in the kind of post-talk pack that we'll be sending out. And yeah, one thing to think about that Imogen mentioned earlier was how do your plans kind of fit into the wider context of the landscape? So, for example, um, your site might sit within a conservation target area if you're within Oxfordshire. So these are areas where habitat enhancement activities are going to be particularly beneficial for wildlife, because they're in particularly important zones for the county. Yeah, have a look and see. There's a map on our website that we'll share, and you can see here if your area is within a conservation target area, and if your habitats that you're maybe creating and managing, seeing if they're aligning with those kind of overall habitat targets for the area. You can also look at your local district and town council policies. Some will have kind of green infrastructure plans or biodiversity plans. So you can see if your site and plans are feeding into that, and let them know if they do. I'm sure they'd be very welcome to hear about what you're doing. And lastly, the more kind of more recent thing that's come up, the local nature recovery strategy. This is being developed at the moment, but there is a draft map available. Again, we'll circulate that, so you can see if your site sits within this kind of green recovery zone that you can see here. Again, this is an area that's been identified to be particularly important across the county, if you're tuning in from Oxfordshire. And you can click onto the map, see what priorities for that particular area have been identified by kind of county experts, and the programme, and then you can see if your actions that you're undertaking kind of align with those priorities. It's just useful for that kind of wider context to know. And yes, we will circulate all of these at the end of the talk. So just to finish off, we've got a few examples of approaches to management plans. All of these upcoming ones we will share in our kind of post-talk packs for you to have a look at, because we can't include them all, the details of them all in here. But here's one that was kind of created by South Oxfordshire District Council. They've got several of these on their website, but this is a really comprehensive kind of consultancy style. So, an expert's gone out there and written a plan. I think they're a good 40, 50 pages long. It's got lots of different information about species records, access to the site, even things about like archaeology. Yeah, all things to maybe have a little think about when you're getting your plans together, but by no means necessary to include all the time. And then, yep, some habitats have details about their particular constraints. And there's, yeah, some really good detail on monitoring. That kind of monitoring table that we showed earlier is from this plan. So if you want a management plan that has every section under the sun for you to refer to, we think this is a really good one. This one is a slightly different one. So this is the Cuttlebrook Local Nature Reserve, which is kind of, I think, in the south of the county. What they've done here, they've kind of split the plan up into sections based on their aims for the site, and zoned those habitats and areas kind of that are on the site in relation to those. So got these different aims here. And then they've created a series of different maps, highlighting the different kind of key habitats there. So here they've got their aquatic habitats, they've got their kind of rivers and ponds and things on there identified, and that then goes into more detail about what they want to do with those different actions and habitats. Here's one where you can see their woodland areas. This is only a snapshot from the report, but yeah, this kind of gives some details about what they're going to be doing kind of going forward in those particular habitats. Lastly, this kind of is a bit more of a management overview. So this has been created by Benson Area Nature Group. They've got a series of these on their websites, and they kind of address various different green spaces that they've got in their local area. So just gives a nice summary of what the site, where it is, or how it's used, what you'll potentially find here. A bit more of a technical summary, but even then it's not, particularly technical. It's just kind of got some of the species that you might find there, different habitats, a summary of the management kind of going forward, and then a little bit more of a detail on those management activities. So if you maybe are a parish council that's got lots of sites, this is quite a nice, simple approach to take. These shorter management plans, they're really good for putting on a website or perhaps a consultation if you're consulting with your residents. And here they've also included some photos as well, just to give that kind of site context. So you can really see how having those images, you can immediately then visualize the site, what might be happening at those habitats. So just a couple of bits to finish off. When your plan comes to an end, 5 years after it's been created, what do you do next? We'd recommend kind of taking stock, with your contractor or volunteer group or whoever's, actually delivering the management of the site, finding out what's working well and maybe not so well, and review the site kind of aims as well. Are they the same as how you started them? Are you, achieving them? Are you kind of attracting more pollinators to your site? Are you getting more people to the site or fewer people to the site if that's what you want? Look at the data from any of your monitoring that you've been doing. So, is there one particular habitat working really well for your target species? And can, you maybe extend this area if it's working really, really well? Have any new opportunities for habitats kind of arisen? You might want to think about doing things slightly differently, like changing the mowing regime at a site to maybe focus on a different flower that's flowering there. Orchids will bloom around June, so you might want to, if they've not been there before and they've kind of established themselves, you might want to tweak your mowing regimes to encourage them to be there, for example. And definitely check in with your volunteers who might be managing the site. Are they happy? Are they kind of happy with what's being asked of them? Are you feeding them enough biscuits? All good questions to ask yourselves. And yeah, lastly, one thing that we always encourage people to do with these is to submit their records to the Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre. It really helps build up a picture of the nature that's kind of treading our landscapes across the county. There's a variety of different ways you can do this. There's the iRecord app, the iNaturalist app, or you can do it on your kind of desktop through a spreadsheet that you can download from their website. I would say any species records are very much welcomed by TVERC, even things like robins and ladybirds. They still want to hear about them. So get out there, get recording, and help build a better picture of what's going on across the county. One thing to note is don't double record. So if you're using iNaturalist, only use iNaturalist. Don't put the same kind of species records into several different programs, because TVERC they won't get confused, but it just kind of helps their data processing generally. Just a few kind of key messages. Not all management plans need to look the same. I hope we've kind of illustrated that with the different ones we've shown you and the different maps. Always keep in mind the audience when writing it. That very technical one that's the district council written is very much different to the one used for the consultation, that more kind of management overview one. So keep people, who are using the plan in mind. Definitely use visual aids, including maps and images to help out. If there's any detail to be included anywhere, we would recommend putting it in the management schedule, because this is the bit that people are going to be kind of referring to most frequently, and our people are going to want to have the most kind of clarity and information. And so, yeah, focus your efforts there if anywhere. And yeah, definitely just letting you know that Wild Oxfordshire can help. Hopefully this has kind of equipped you with the tools to go and start writing your own management plans. But we are here to help if you do need some kind of ecological input into some of your sections, and some advice on maybe what directions you should be taking. So yeah, let's keep in touch. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. We're going to have a few questions. We've got about 8 minutes for questions now. So I'll be short, but yeah, all sorts of different places that you can find us now. And if you have, particularly enjoyed the talk, then you're welcome to donate to us through our website. Yeah, so have you got any questions? I think if we try and keep them kind of general, to management plans, and not, what can I do with my little bit of land that I have, that'd be really helpful. If you do have those questions, you can also email Imogen and I. I've put our email addresses up on the screen there. And yes, as I mentioned, the various different resources, templates and examples we will be sharing in a kind of pack after the webinar. So yeah, any questions? Imogen, have you been watching the chat for anything
have
that's come
been
up?
watching the chat, and just to say that Marcus did respond, and Marcus said he's thinking of running some regular drop-in sessions, maybe monthly. This is on the Land app, either both tools and just planning generally. So if that's of interest, just specify that in an email. Marcus, I think, have you put your email in? You might want to add your email if you've not added that already. And I had a question about guidance on a BioBlitz, and I've included a couple of links in there. As far as I'm aware, there is, again, it's one of those where there's no sort of black and white, there's no hard and fast rules. So I've added a couple of links in. There some information on the iNaturalist website, and also I think the other one I added in, Natural History Museum, which is do some really useful guidance actually. But I mean, one of the advantages of a BioBlitz is it can be an opportunity for a community to get together. For example, my local church several years ago had an event, had a churchyard festival, and as part of that they had a BioBlitz. So it depends what time of year. And you can use apps, you can choose specific surveys. You can't obviously cover everything, because if it's on, if it's a certain time of year, you're not going to be able to survey for everything. But late spring or summer is a good time. And just encourage people to go out and record, whether that's iRecord or iNaturalist, or just writing down what they see. But it's good also to have some people coordinating specific surveys, people who do have some knowledge of certain groups of species or wildlife, and also know how to use the technology if you're using certain apps. So you could maybe pick several different surveys and have volunteers leading that. That's what I would recommend. I'm just looking at other questions. We've got a specific one about verges and nettles, coarse grasses. Unfortunately, quite a common query. If you want to email us directly, because we are running out of time now, and we can help with that, provide some advice. I see someone's already provided some useful advice about hay rattle. We've covered. Sorry, Rachel.
Sorry, I was just going to say, a couple of people have asked if the material is going to be available following today's talk. So this is going to be put on our website, both on our website and on our YouTube channel. We are going to be updating over the next kind of couple of months a whole new section on our website around management plans. But yes, we will make sure that the pack that we send out is going to be shareable. So long as you have that link, you can pass it on to people who might not have been able to attend this evening. So yes, rest assured you will get that information and be able to pass it on.
I think that's covered most of the questions. Yeah, so do contact us directly if you have more specific questions. We'll be happy to help. Yeah, I think that's
otherwise, I think we
them.
will close our webinar here. Yeah, thank you so much for attending. Lovely to hear from you all this evening. I wish you all the best in your management plan endeavours, and do keep in touch. Thank you so much.